time with Captain Xavier. I'm Chaylo and I play Captain Xavier here on YouTube and in a plethora of other places, including the Empire of Adria, which is a medieval recreation group that I used to be very active in. And this story hails from there, back at the height of the crew's power in Adria. And it is of the story of when we defeated, kidnapped, extorted, ransomed, and tortured an emperor. In that order. Which is odd and important. This was Emperor Lapse, Constantine. And he hailed from Florida, is where he was based, but up in the Northwest, we held our part of the Crown War. The way the Crown Wars were held is, they were held in 4 regions: Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, Southwest, and whoever won the most points from all 4 wars. The war was held on the same weekend. I think it was Labor Day weekend. Could have been Memorial Day weekend. Whichever one is later in the year. I can never remember. But they all held the wars, and then however many points you get all together determines who the next emperor and empress is. And Dame Seraphine, you may recall her from the cake incident. I swear it was not my fault. She really wanted Lapse, Sir Lapse at the time, he wasn't emperor yet, to win. And so she contacted the crew and was willing to augment whatever offer he made in the hopes that we would fight for him. Now, we were still, I thought we were relatively unknown at the Imperial level, but after we went to war with another subdivision and crucified their Duke, apparently the Imperials took notice. So I got contacted by both Sir Durfel, who was the other person running for the crown, as well as Sir Lapse. Sir Durfel called me, and I felt like I needed to wash my ear afterwards. It was like talking to a sleazy car salesman. So he did not do well, though his offer was a good offer. But Lapse's offer, combined with Dame Seraphine's offer, was considerably better. Now, Lapse contacted me via email and wrote an email in character, which was really cool. It was all flowery prose and all of that, and trying to appeal to my ego and try to get me personally on his side. Because that is what Dame Seraphine told him that he should do. That I was really into, playing the character, which I was, and that he should, contact me in character. The problem is, the character of Captain Xavier is kind of a dick. So, I wrote back in character that, you can't just hire me, you must hire the whole crew. Your offer is great if you wanted to hire me, but I've got mouths to feed. And he thought that I was genuinely offended, which I was not. It was entirely in character. And he wrote back going, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. That's what I was told to do." He was like, no, this is fantastic. This is great. This is the kind of thing I enjoy. This is my character responding. Don't worry. I'm definitely interested. But do me a big favor. Contact Dame Seraphine and tell her that you think that you have offended me and that there's no way we're going to fight for you. This is going to be fun. And he did, and Seraphine fell for it, and it was hilarious. And she had plans to get back at us that never came to fruition. But, point was, we ended up fighting for Lapse, and because of our support and as well as the lobbying that I did, they ended up winning. They barely scraped a victory. It was almost 50-50 on the other 4 locations, but we completely swept the Northwest. As in, we outnumbered the enemy so badly they had to surrender at opening court. And so we got all the points, and that tipped the scales and when we ended up winning. So to show his gratitude for that, he came to our next big war, the next banner war that we held the next either Memorial Day or Labor Day, whichever one is earlier in the year. Can never keep them apart. Don't think it really matters. But he came up here. And this was the first time that an Imperial had come to visit since I'd made my vow that if I ever had the chance to take Imperials hostage again, I wouldn't miss it. And I was no longer Duke. I was just the mercenary captain up in the north. And he came to visit us, and he'd sent us most of the payment that he owed us already. And Seraphine had paid her part, and he brought another part of it with him. But he hadn't completely paid us yet. In fact, he still hasn't, which is why I'm ratting him out in this video. To this day, he still owes me a battle axe for being his general in that war, and someday I may collect. But who knows? Anyway. The way the war ended up getting fought was it was a banner war, which meant that we weren't really fighting for, who's going to be crown or who's going to be emperor or anything like that. We were fighting literally for a banner. Whichever subdivision won the banner war got the banner. But there were now a whole bunch of subdivisions up here. When we first started, there was just Alhambra, which was Washington, Idaho, Western Montana, and we conquered Canada while I was Duke, and Oregon. So there was the two. And so those two sides would presumably fight for the banner war. But after I stepped down and the previous Duke was not able to hold Alhambra together, which we'd gotten too large geographically anyway, there were now like 4 or 5 subdivisions, I don't even remember anymore, up here in the Pacific Northwest. And so it wasn't an easy way to have a war. You didn't want to try to have a 5-way war. That got messy. And you could form alliances, but that wasn't really happening. So they decided to do something else. And we figured out what they were doing. When you signed in to the event, you were given a site token. A little thing to remind you that you were at this Imperial Banner War. And half of them had red ribbons, and half of them had green ribbons. They were really subtle. So we figured out what was going on. Emperor Lebey's colors were red, so we figured everyone with a red token was going to be his army, and everyone with the green token was going to defend the Northwest. So we split up the crew evenly on both sides. Both of my sergeants ended up on Lebey's side with a couple of the crew, and I ended up with all the corporals and lance corporals defending the Northwest. And we were right. That is exactly what happened. The Emperor led his army along with his champion, Sir Joffrey, brilliant duelist. He was his bodyguard, as it were. And we absolutely trounced them because I had most of my crew, and Lebey didn't know how to use the crew that he was given well. They kept telling him, no, Your Majesty, you don't want to do that because they're going to do this, and we're going to get flanked, and we're going to get wiped out. Like, no, worry, I can hold the flank. And then I shot him in the head, and the flank collapsed, and we wiped him up. But after each round of the official sides, we asked if we could do crew versus everybody. And so we did. We did crew versus everyone in steel, in Chennai, in rapier, and we defeated them handily every time. Which was kind of an eye-opener to the other subdivisions when they realized my personal army, my private army, could defeat the combined armies of the Pacific Northwest. And that's when I say we were at the height of our power. And, yeah, that caused some friction. Anyway, that night, they held kind of a party. Most of the people who were into drinking went and they did their drinking. Very few of the crew actually drank, and those of us that did knew better than to get raging drunk at an event because there was always more combat the next day. And the Emperor was off getting schmoozed by the types of people who like schmoozing emperors and sucking up and getting awards and all of that. But I'd made an oath. I would not let another Imperial escape. So, whilst everyone else was kind of distracted for a moment, and I went over to the Emperor and asked, Your Majesty, could I have a word with you in private? And he said, actually, yes, I was hoping to have a word with you as well. And we go off into the night. And I told him the story that I told you last time about taking the estates hostage. And I told him about my oath. And he was well into his bottle of whatever it was he was drinking, some rot gut that somebody had given him. But he figured out what was happening as the crew, all dressed in black cloaks, melted out of the shadows, all armed with muskets and swords and spears, and we took him hostage. And luckily, he was the type of fellow who thought that was hilarious and went quietly. We took him to our castle, because we actually had a mobile castle. It was all tarp walls, and we did have an actual 2-story tower, though. And we took him inside, and we said, all right, so we handily defeated your army. So the Northwest has won the banner, but which subdivision actually gets to keep it? And we want it to go to our subdivision, which was called Roanoke. And we believe it should go to Roanoke, and if you don't give us what we want, we're going to have you tortured by these 2 witches. Now, I actually did have a pair of professional dominatrixes who were twins on retainer. We called them the Twitches, and they were for torturing people. And I finally had the opportunity to do so. It never come up before. They were also my tax lawyers. They were accountants and lawyers. They did my taxes, and when I needed people tortured, they tortured them. I used to lead a really interesting life. Anyway, he agreed. Of course, gave in to our demands. He's like, well, you guys clearly were the ones who really won this war, and your subdivision is the newest subdivision and is still technically an Imperial subdivision, and so, yes, I will grant the banner to Roanoke for safekeeping until the next Imperial Banner War. Very good, Your Majesty. And then he asked, can I get tortured anyway? As you wish, your majesty. So we sat him down in the chair and chained him down, and he got flogged by 2 beautiful women. He then he was well into that bottle. He's like, okay, I want to try something. Send runners to all of the other camps and tell them that I've been kidnapped and that you're demanding ransom. I want to see what I'm worth. I want to see what they'll do. This could be a fun game. And an often ally of ours, and arguably a member of the auxiliary, Aedan, had seen this go down. He saw the Emperor get captured, but didn't say anything. Like, oh, this is going to be good. So he was already back in one of their camps, just giggling to himself, when the runner came in and said, the Emperor's been kidnapped by pirates. They're torturing him and demanding ransom. And people looked around and went, does anyone have any root beer? No? Nobody? He's screwed. Oh, well. And they went back to drinking. Nobody came. The Emperor is being flogged in the pirate's castle, and nobody came to his aid. He was actually somewhat disappointed. Now, somebody did eventually come. And back in Adria, one of my knighthoods, there were 4 things you could get knighted in. Combat, target archery, ministry, and arts and sciences, which is making things and learning things and teaching things. And I used to write a lot of poetry, mostly sonnets, so the occasional epic, and of course the occasional dirty limerick. I'm a pirate after all. But I wrote a lot of sonnets, and I chose to write a sonnet of that night's events and presented it to the Emperor the next day. And I happen to have that poem right here. It has survived the years. Many of my sonnets have not, but here it goes. In the black of night, the crew assembled armed, and hostage took Emperor Constantine. A ransom asked for him to not be harmed, for they had made away with him unseen. At first, not one would answer to his call. His mournful cries just fell on deafened ears. It seemed that no one cared for him at all, condemning him to torture and to jeers. At last, the cook arrived to set him free. She stole the captain's hat and grabbed a gun, but in the end she paid the pirate's fee and joined the pirates in their night of fun. At last his worth was settled clear and true at just 1 single can of Mountain Dew. So after probably 30 minutes of nobody coming, the cook, a belly dancer, and a duchess came to lay siege to the pirate's castle to save the Emperor. It was Dame Seraphine, Dame Amara, and the Duchess of Gloucester, whose name I cannot remember. But there was a kerfuffle at the gate. Dame Seraphine snatched my hat and grabbed one of the pirates' guns, but couldn't break through the walls, of course, because we were armed and had walls. And so finally, we said, okay, well, bring us what you have. We will ransom him to the highest bidder for whatever you bring. And they brought us 1 can of Mountain Dew. This can of Mountain Dew, which has remained unopened because it is quite literally an emperor's ransom. It also expired in 2009. This was years ago. And so the emperor was officially released. Now, we had already, released him because he gave in to our demands. But they released him. And at that point, it quit being so much a matter of ransoming the emperor as it was bribing your way into the party in the castle, because we had music going, we had the emperor getting tortured, we had dancing, we had, combat breaking out, and there was dicing in the corner. The party was in the castle. Everyone else was out just getting drunk in their own camps. Pirates have so much fun. Why do they get... We helped the emperor. Anyway, yeah. Now, after the ransom was paid, at a single can of Mountain Dew, the emperor was a little bit disappointed by this. He had expected more of a response. All these people were trying to, kiss his ass the entire weekend, and now was the chance to truly show their loyalty and show how much he meant to them, and nobody responded. He was a little upset. So he sent specifically for Sir Dorn, who was the most prolific of the imperial ass-kissers. This man was a flunky to his core. He's the one that we defeated in the border war, and the one that I crucified. So there was some resentment towards me, I feel. But he was the one who was truly trying to get on LeBay's favor, and he had made no attempt to save him. So he specifically sent told us to send a runner to bring Lord Dorn to him. And he told us, okay, here's what's going to happen. He's going to come in, and because he's a grovelly little weasel, he's going to bow, lower his head and grovel a bit, and then he's going to look up at me when I tell him to. And then he looks at the twitch on his right and says, when he looks up, I want you to hit me with that whip across the chest as hard as you possibly can. And I'm sitting in the corner going, I'm going to get blamed for this. This was his idea. I have no idea what the significance of the rest of this story is. Sir Dorn comes in, and sure enough, kneels, grovels, looks up, and the twitch, whap, right across the chest. It probably left a mark, but there was no way you could possibly misconstrue or deny that we were literally, genuinely flogging the Emperor at this point. And you could see Sir Dorn's brain shift into neutral. Just, no information. His head was ready to explode. And he gives me this look of, how do you get away with this stuff? And then the Emperor genuinely goes, Dorn, they're torturing me. And they've said that they will not release me unless you sing, I'm a Little Teapot. And Dorn gave me a look that said, as long as I live, I will never forgive you for this. And I genuinely, honest to gods, have no idea what the significance of that was. To this day, I don't know what that was about. But it had to have been bad, because he wouldn't do it. The Emperor is being whipped before his very eyes, and he won't sing I'm a Little Teapot. No idea. No idea. There is some backstory there that I am unaware of, but I got blamed for it. So he refused. He said, my lord, my honor will simply not allow that. Is there anything else I can do? And I said, well, it's thirsty work torturing emperors, and I'm out of root beer, so bring me some root beer. And he left into the night, and he never came back. He never brought the root beer. I don't know if he couldn't find a store, or if there was just no root beer in camp to be had, but he never returned with the root beer. At this point, the Emperor is a little bit disappointed, but he's still having fun. But it is time to relieve the royal bladder, because he's been drinking a lot. The jug is almost empty. So we form up an honor guard to take him to the privies. And when he gets there, he informs us that this is the game that I wish we were playing where I'm from. This is fun. You guys are silly, and you're pirates, and you're in character, and you don't give a damn, and you get to do what you want, and it's awesome, and there should be more of that. And I don't see why the banner should have to go to a subdivision. You guys are the real spirit of the Northwest. I'm awarding the banner to the crew. And he went into the bathroom. At which point, I sent for the chair. If you recall in the cake incident, I got carried into court on my chair by 4 crewmen with poles through the chair. And that was the chair we had him strapped to and, was flogging him. We'd used the pole loops to hold him down. So the crew went and got it and brought the poles. And so when he came out, we presented him with the chair and we brought him back in true honor, carried by crewmen, a beautiful woman on each arm, a jug of, I don't even know what it was. And then, on our way back through the camps, then somebody decided to try to save him. And it was the Duchess of Alhambra. She came with 2 rapiers against 30 pirates armed with muskets. And then Dorn came running up and took one of the swords. And yeah, release the Emperor, you scallywags. We're looking at this man being carried on a chair, a beautiful woman on each arm, a jug of whiskey, a grin on his face. Like, does this man look like a prisoner to you? His ransom was paid hours ago. I'm like, well, then you should just leave him here and be off. Like, Your Majesty, do you really want us to leave you with these people? And he stood up and he embraced them both. Thank you for your attempts to save me. I have already been released, and but I appreciate the gesture. Then he got back in the chair and leave these people to their politics, back to the party. And we carried him back into the castle. And he and I went into the castle first, and I finally took him up into our tower, which we had a trailer that we had built a tower onto that had walls that flipped up to create a second story, and there was a ladder on the inside that led up to it, and then the inside was all weapon racks and trunk storage, and everything that we needed to move our castle was inside that tower. So I took him up to the top, so that he could look down, and he's looking down as all the people are funneling back into the castle, and the party's starting, the music's going, and more drinks are being brought out, and it looks like, this is really amazing. I can actually look down upon my subjects like a true ruler, and bodices. I love bodices. And you look over the castle wall, like, there really is a magnificent view from up here. A part of me was like, oh my god, the Emperor's a lech. Wait a minute, he asked to be tortured. What am I talking about? We then went back down, and there was more dancing and singing, and more people bribing their way into the castle, and fun was had by everybody. And finally, as it started wearing down, and there was music playing of some kind, the Emperor asked if we could bring out two crossed swords, to be placed in the middle of the courtyard of the castle, because he was going to grace us with the Imperial Saber Dance, a traditional Scottish saber dance. And so he set up, and the whole crew is around him in a circle, and it's mostly crew at this point. Most people have gone back to their camps. This is our camp, so we're not going anywhere. And he's doing his saber dance, and I send an order around the line. I tell this person, send it down. Tell this person, send it down. And then we all watch and wait. So it's in the dark. There's only firelight and torchlight, as there's 30 pirates surrounding him in the dark as he's doing his saber dance. And eventually he kind of stops and looks around as we're all just intently staring at him. Because I'll be honest, I'm starting to feel a little self-conscious. At which point I give the order, all right, you scum! Aye! Dancing time! And the entire crew broke into riverdance. And the Emperor fell down laughing. And that was it for him. He'd had enough. He finally went back to his camp, went to sleep, and then the next morning, at opening court, informed... that was when he announced, like, so many of you are aware, I was kidnapped and tortured by pirates last night. And the looks on two men's faces, I will never forget. Sir Joffrey, who was supposed to be his bodyguard, but who had gone to bed early, was standing behind him with his sword, and honest to God, I think he genuinely considered throwing himself on that sword. And he gave me a look of, I failed my Emperor, and it's your fault, and I will never forgive you. And the other one was Duke Elric, who was the one hosting the event, and therefore the one responsible for the Emperor's safety. He had also gone to bed early. And he gives me this look of, how do you get away with this stuff? Because the Emperor clearly thought it was fantastic and loved it. Like, I was tortured, I was ransomed. So Captain Xavier, what do you have to say for yourself? And I read the poem aloud to everybody. And it was well received in London. And he told them, yes, I have indeed decided that the banner shall go to the crew. They will hold the banner until the next banner war. And again, the looks of you guys. So that was that. There was one final happening at this event. The crew was given all sorts of awards. We were given the Imperial Seal of Excellence, which is incredibly difficult to win. It can only be given by the Emperor. It can only be given once per reign, and it can only be given to non-estate entities, which there aren't a lot of those. It's like guilds and domains and things like that. And while the crew was not a domain or a guild or anything official, we do not exist on paper within the Empire of Adria at all, we were very clearly an entity, we very clearly existed, and we were clearly very, very good at what we did, which was war. And so we were awarded the Imperial Seal of Excellence, which allows us to put a gold fleur-de-lis on our heraldry. So that was neat. We won it again the next year. So we have two. We're the only group to ever get it twice, as far as I know. I was made a Baron of the Imperial Court, which that happened again the next year. I was already a Viscount. I have so many titles, it's ridiculous. It's like a page long. It's silly. And then later that day, Labey held a meeting of all of the current crowns in the Northwest, as well as all of the people who were going to be the next crowns, because that had already been determined. The wars had been fought, or the elections had been held, and they knew who was going to be the next ones. They just hadn't taken over yet. So it was kind of the lame duck period of the previous dukes and duchesses, and me. I was invited to this meeting by special runner sent by the emperor. And so I show up to the meeting with my chair, and they're like, no, this is a meeting for crowns and future crowns. And I go, I was summoned by the emperor. I don't know what's going on. So I sit down. And the emperor finally arrives, because he's on emperor time, and I'm getting looks of, why are you here? You're not a crown. Pirate. And the emperor comes down, and he sits down, and he goes, so I invited all the crowns, because you are the current leaders, and you have some things that you need to finish up before your reign ends. And of course I invited the future crowns, because you will be taking over where they leave off, and I want to talk to you about where you're planning to take your subdivisions. And I invited Captain Xavier, well, because... And he points over to my castle where my army is currently drilling in formation. Because of that. And he explained that, the crew is arguably one of the most powerful political entities in the Northwest. He can defeat all of your armies in battle. We can't pretend he is not a driving force in the Northwest. And so, yeah, discussions were had about, what events we wanted to have, how we wanted to expand, issues with borders. There were some, when the subdivisions fractured, it had not been a pleasant fracturing. And so there was some animosity that still existed in the various subdivisions, and so that all got worked out. But the fact that that day the emperor declared the crew a sovereign entity, essentially, was pretty amazing. At closing court, he also did another thing that was another reason we knew we'd supported the right man. My sergeant at the time, Sergeant Kyle, who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan, was a dedicated sergeant. He did not want to become a knight, because then you get called sir, at which point he felt he would be an officer, and he knew he did not want to be an officer. He did not want to become a lieutenant. He wasn't ever going to be the captain. He wanted to stay a sergeant, but he had all of the points to become a knight. There was kind of an experience-based system. You had to have fought in so many tournaments or fought in so many wars and have wins and so forth. He had everything he needed to have several knighthoods. He had just refused to ever take them. And there were certain privileges that knights had, rights and privileges that only a knight had. They got a vote on the imperial estates. They got to carry weapons in imperial court. There are all sorts of things that knights could do that a sergeant couldn't. And so we petitioned the emperor to create a special position called Sergeant Major, which had all of the rights and privileges of a knight, but not the title. It is actually an imperial offense to call Sergeant Major Kyle Sir. And he granted it, and it was awarded to him, and that is why he is now the Sergeant Major. And the fact that Labe would allow something like that as emperor was the sort of, this was very much this is the sort of emperor that I want to have, and I'm glad that we supported him. But he still owes me an axe, so if I ever see him again, he better have it. Alright, so that's the story of how we kidnapped, blackmailed, tortured, ransomed, and got rewarded for it by an emperor. That is what the crew is all about, and that is what that sort of spirit is where I'm hoping the auxiliary will eventually go. That kind of fun at events, where we make the events better by making it more interesting, by having, structure and camaraderie and helping with a lot of the logistics, food and water and loaner gear and all of that. That is what I want the auxiliary to eventually become, and it's very rapidly getting there. And the crew is growing again, so that is awesome. So, future stories. I think another good one would be the next Imperial Banner War, when the next Imperial hopefuls showed up, wanting to get the crew to fight for them. There were a couple of Imperials that showed up to that, and while we didn't kidnap them, we did have a lot of fun with them. So that's the first option. There'll be the next Banner War. I believe the runner-up, I should look that up. The runner-up was when the Sergeant Major and I took a robotics course and all of the shenanigans that ensued in that. And the final option, I'm actually going to throw out the Border War again, which was the war between Alhambra when I was Duke and Oregon, where Dorne was from. And you could learn the beginnings of the animosity that kind of existed there. So there are the options. There is the story. I hope you enjoyed this one. This one was a lot of fun. This was happy times for me. So there you have it. Thank you for watching.